She saved a wounded Comanche from a Posse. The next day, his warriors surrounded her house. The sun beat down like judgment on the New Mexico dust, turning every breath Clara McKee took into grit. The sky was a sheet of white, so bright it made her eyes water. But she didn't stop. The bucket on her hips sloshed, nearly empty from the half-dried creek she had walked a mile to reach. Water had become her second religion, earned, never gifted. She was halfway home when she saw him. At first, she thought it was just another carcass, coyote, maybe, or something buzzards hadn't picked clean yet. But then she caught the rise and fall of a chest, ragged and shallow. Her steps slowed. Her heart jumped sideways in her chest. He was young, barely a man, skin the color of old copper, black hair matted to his face with blood and dirt. An arrow shaft jutted from his thigh, snapped near the base. His shirt was torn, revealing muscle and bone, his lips cracked, his eyes closed. Blood soaked the dust around him, dark and drying. Her father's voice echoed from some memory she'd buried deep. "You see one of them alone, girl, he's bait. The rest ain't far." But her feet didn't move. She crouched slowly, clutching the bucket with one hand and pressing her other to his neck. There was a pulse, weak but there. The groan he made as she shifted his head was small. Animal, not dangerous, just alive. She reached into the bucket and let a few drops of water trickle onto his lips. He flinched, then swallowed. His eyelids fluttered. He muttered something, not English, not Spanish. Maybe Comanche, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. That was when the horses came. The thudding of hooves came up fast behind her, 6 riders, faces half covered in bandanas, rifles slung low. Dust and sweat clung to their coats. Tucker rode at the front, a man with a voice like coal scraped on metal and a temper mean as a rattler. "Miss McKee," he drawled, reining in. His eyes flicked to the man at her feet. "Well now, ain't this a surprise?" Clara stood slowly, body tense. "He's dying." "He's Comanche," Tucker snapped. "Killed 2 men back near Dry Creek, shot them through the back. Bastard ran and left his brothers behind." She didn't move. One of the men laughed. "Let her save him. He'll gut her before the sun sets." Tucker leaned forward in his saddle, face hard. "You help him, Clara, and you're a traitor. Might as well paint your face red and take up a tomahawk." Clara's jaw tightened. "He's bleeding to death. Then let him." Tucker shifted his rifle. "Unless you want us to finish it for you." She stared him down. "You raise that rifle again on my land, Tucker. I swear to God I'll put you in the ground next to him." The silence that followed stretched tight and brittle. One of the younger men muttered, "Ain't worth." Tucker spat into the dirt. "You always were a fool for lost causes." Then he turned his horse with a jerk and galloped off. The others followed. Clara waited until their dust faded. Only then did she drop to her knees beside the young man again. "You better be worth it," she muttered, pulling the scar from her neck to wrap around his leg. Her hands shook. Her breath came fast. But she worked like a woman who had no choice. The arrow had to stay for now. She'd learned that much when her husband came back with one in his shoulder. She worked, died anyway. But not from the wound, from the infection. "Damn you," she whispered as she hauled him over her shoulder. "You're heavier than you look." Every step home was agony. Her back screamed. She worked in her mirror. Her arms trembled. Her legs buckled more than once. But she kept going, step after dragging step, until her cabin came into view. She worked in from the beater than a carrying a program. She worked until the arrow, a squat, sun-scorched shelter that had stood longer than her marriage, longer than her hope. Inside, she kicked the rug aside and opened the cellar hatch. She worked in his leg paces. Overmarrying, the cool air rose up to greet her like a sigh. "I'll regret this," she muttered, easing him down into the dark. "But not today." She worked until Liero. She tossed down a blanket, a tin of salve, and a canteen before closing the hatch. Only when she bolted the trap door did her knees give out. She slumped against the wall, lungs burning, fingers raw from blood and splinters. She worked until Liero. Her sotus net about, outside, the wind stirred dust into the yard. Inside, Clara McKee stared at the door, rifle across her lap, and whispered to no one in particular, "I hope you live, Comanche, because I just bet everything I got on a man I don't even know." The The cellar was dark and cool, smelling of earth and onions, the kind of scent that clung to roots and secrets. Clara lit a small oil lamp and set it on the floor beside the cot she had dragged down earlier. The Comanche lay motionless, save for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. His skin shone with sweat, streaked with dirt and dried blood. The wrong was the Weldon, and married Weldon brooms. The arrow still jutted from his thigh, angry and red. Clara knelt beside him, her hands trembling despite herself. She had boiled water, brought down clean rags, whiskey for cleaning, and thread she hadn't used since the last time she tried to mend something that didn't want to hold together. Even then, Clara, he didn't stir as she cut the fabric from around the wound. Only when she poured whiskey over the torn flesh did he groan low in his throat, a sound between pain and warning. His eyes fluttered open, dark and unfocused, and she saw the wildness in them, the animal edge of someone who'd spent too long hunted. "It's all right," she said softly, unsure who she was trying to convince. "You're safe, for now." He didn't answer, didn't even blink. She set her jaw and went back to work. She couldn't pull the arrow yet. It would bleed too much. So she cleaned around it, packed the wound, and wrapped it as tight as she dared. Her hands moved with clumsy care, guided more by memory than skill. When it was done, she wiped the sweat from her brow and leaned back on her heels, breath short. "You gonna talk?" she asked, not expecting a reply. "Or just stare at me like I'm the one in the wrong?" The man's gaze didn't change, still wary, still watching. "You don't have to thank me," she muttered. "Just don't try to kill me when you can stand again." That night, she slept by the trapdoor, rifle within reach. She told herself it was precaution. She told herself she didn't trust him, and that was still mostly true. But when she woke near midnight, the cellar was quiet, save for a whisper. A single word repeated in a voice dry and cracked as old paper. "Nokomi." "Why?" She sat up listening. The voice came again, soft and low. "Nokomi. When?" She didn't know what it meant. Not English, not Spanish, but something about it, about the way he said it, made her heart slow in her chest. A prayer maybe, a name, a memory. She lay back down and stared at the ceiling, eyes wide until sleep finally came. By morning, the fever had broken. She went down with a tin cup of broth and found him awake, eyes clearer, following her movement. He didn't try to rise, he didn't speak, but when she handed him the cup, his fingers brushed hers, and for the first time he held her gaze without suspicion. He drank slow. When he finished, he handed the cup back with both hands, deliberate, careful, respectful. Then he looked at her again, and though no words came, there was something unmistakable in his expression. Gratitude. Bon. She set the cup aside and folded her arms. "You're welcome," she said. He nodded once, slow. They sat in silence, two strangers joined by injury and dust, neither knowing what came next, but both alive. For now. The morning light came pale and sharp, slicing through the dusty air like a blade. Clara was feeding the fire in the stove when she heard the first sound, hooves. Not one, or two, many. Soft, deliberate, not galloping like the pass. This was a procession, a warning. She crossed to the window and looked out. They came like shadows rising from the earth. More than a dozen Comanche warriors approached on horseback, silent as the wind, spreading out in a wide circle around her cabin. Feathers moved in their hair, rifles slung low, tomahawks gleaming at their hips. They did not shout, they did not draw weapons, but their presence pressed against the world like a storm waiting to break. At the head rode a man older than the others, straight-backed, with a face carved by sun and war. His braids were streaked with silver, his chest marked with faded paint and scars like history written on skin. His eyes were sharp, deep-set, and utterly unreadable. Maka. He was not just a leader, he was a reckoning. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. She grabbed the rifle from beside the door and stepped out slowly, boots crunching on the dry ground. Her dress fluttered in the breeze, and her mouth felt dry as dust. She kept the rifle down, but close. The circle of warriors didn't move, didn't speak. She raised her chin. "You came for him." Maka dismounted with the grace of a man who'd never needed to run from anything. He took 2 steps forward, hands empty, but his stare cut like a blade. "We came for our blood," he said, his voice low, rich with warning. Clara held her ground. "You're too late. If you came to bury him." Maka's eyes narrowed. "I found him bleeding in the dirt. she continued, keeping her voice steady. Arrow in his leg, half dead from the sun. Your people left him behind. A murmur stirred among the warriors. Maka said nothing. He studied her the way a hawk studies a rabbit, deciding whether it was worth the dive. I dragged him here, Clara said. I cleaned the wound, fed him broth. He's still breathing because I didn't listen to the men who wanted him dead. Still silence. Then from beneath the house, a muffled sound, a low groan, unmistakable. The eyes of every warrior shifted toward the floorboards behind her. Clara did not flinch. He's alive, she said, but not ready to ride. Maka stepped closer. You keep him like a prisoner. I kept him like a man, one who would have died without me. His gaze flicked to her hands, to the edge of the rifle now visible behind her hip. I didn't bring him here to trade, she added, and I didn't bring him here to own. Another murmur passed through the warriors, low, unsure. Maka looked past her toward the roof, the chimney, the smoke that still drifted thin and steady. His fingers flexed at his side, and then he turned to speak in his own tongue. The men responded with nods, curt and slow. Clara could not understand the words, but she knew what they meant. Judgment, debate, suspicion. She watched as Maka stepped back, then lifted his chin. You say you saved him, he said at last. Then you watch over him, until he speaks, until he chooses. Her breath caught. She nodded once. He turned, mounted his horse again, and signaled his men. But they did not ride away. They dismounted instead, forming a perimeter, not hostile, not friendly, waiting. They would not leave without their brother. And Clara, for the first time, realized she wasn't sheltering one man anymore. She was now standing in the middle of something much bigger than her own fears. The Comanche did not leave. They made no campfires, said little, but they were there, silent silhouettes around the cabin, like spirits waiting to reclaim something lost. Each night Clara bolted the doors, though not out of fear. Not anymore. Fear had begun to give way to something more difficult, uncertainty. On the second morning, Maka returned to her doorstep. Clara stepped out, rifle at her side, chin held high. Her heart beat hard, but her voice stayed firm. He's not ready to go. Maka's expression didn't change. He is our blood. We take care of our own. You left him to die. He chose to fight. He accepted the risk. Clara swallowed. Maybe so, but I didn't let him die, and I won't let you hate him just to finish what the desert started. Maka's gaze sharpened. You think we kill our wounded? I don't know what you'll do, she said. That's the point. The silence between them stretched taut, a test of will. She could see the conflict flicker in Maka's eyes. Honor, suspicion, pride. At last he gave a curt nod. One more day, he said, then we speak again. He turned and walked away, boots stirring the dust. Clara let out a breath only when he disappeared behind the trees. That night she brought a fresh bandage and a bowl of warm water to the cellar. Koa was awake, propped slightly on one elbow, his skin pale but no longer fevered. When she knelt beside him, he didn't flinch. She dipped the cloth and began unwrapping his thigh. The wound looked angry, but cleaner, healing, slowly. You've got a stubborn will, she muttered, wiping gently. Koa's voice came low, rough. So do you. She blinked at him. English now? He nodded once. Some. Good. I'm tired of talking to myself. He managed the smallest smile, just at the corner of his mouth. Then his gaze shifted, searching her face. Why? He asked. She paused. Why what? Why save me? Clara sat back on her heels, letting the question settle between them. After a moment she said, You weren't a threat, not then, and you were dying. That was enough. Koa studied her. That's simple. No. She ran a hand through her hair. But it's the best I've got. Silence again. Then, because something in his eyes made her feel safe to say it, she added, My husband was killed 5 years ago. Not by Comanche. I don't think. No one really knew. It was a cattle skirmish. One of those, no one's wrong but everyone bleeds sort of fights. Koa looked at her gently. You think I am him? She shook her head. I don't think anything anymore. I used to believe the world was simpler. Good men and bad. Yours and ours. Now I think we're all just guessing until it's too late. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said softly but clearly, "I am not the man who killed your husband. I know." She didn't realize she meant it until it came out of her mouth. Their eyes held, not as enemies, not even as strangers, but as two people trying to speak through the cracks. Later that night, as she sat at the top of the stairs, with the trapdoor cracked open just enough to listen, she heard his voice again. "Nakomi," he whispered into the dark. And this time, she whispered back, "Peace." The dust came first. A long finger of it rising against the hard blue sky, curling like smoke across the ridge. Clara spotted it just before noon while gathering wood near the edge of her property. She squinted into the distance, heart tightening as shapes began to take form. Horses, saddles, rifles, Tucker, they were back. She dropped the kindling and sprinted toward the cabin, skirts tangling around her knees, boots pounding dry earth. Inside, she slammed the door shut and pulled the rifle from the wall, breath already coming fast. Then she stepped outside, hands steady but stomach churning. The riders thundered into her yard like a storm uninvited. 7 of them. Tucker in the lead, his red face gleamed with sweat and fury, and the others flanked him, rifles at the ready, eyes gleaming with the thrill of impending violence. "Well, I'll be damned," Tucker called out, pulling his horse to a stop. "Look at this little frontier queen, standing tall like she runs the territory." Clara said nothing. He tilted his head, grinning. "He's still in there? Your war prize?" She gritted her teeth. "Tell me, Clara," he sneered. "You become his woman yet? Or you just keeping him warm till they come cut your throat in your sleep?" The men laughed, ugly and mean. Clara didn't move. "Turn around, Tucker. You have no right to be here." Tucker's smile dropped. "We've got every right. That's Comanche land out there, but this is ours, and we're not about to let one of theirs play possum here while the rest of them crawl out of the brush." He kicked his horse forward a few paces. "I heard things, that you're sheltering one, that he's not just breathing, but talking." Clara stepped forward, placing herself square in the center of the yard. "Leave," she said. "Now. I won't ask again." One of the men raised his rifle. "She's bluffing." A rustle answered from the trees behind the cabin. Beside the barn, among the brush, silent movement, purposeful. Maka's warriors had not left. They emerged from the edge of the woods like wraiths, rifles raised but not aimed, watching, surrounding, waiting. Tucker stiffened. "Well, look at that, they didn't run. Brave little beasts, aren't they?" The tension in the air drew tight as a wire. Clara's voice cut through it. "I will not let blood spill on my land unless I am given no other choice." Tucker turned his glare on her. "You really picked your side, didn't you?" "I didn't pick a side," she snapped. "I chose to save a life. You came here to kill." He laughed once, bitter. "You sound just like my wife before she ran off with a preacher." Maka stepped out from behind the cabin, walking slowly but without fear. His warriors fanned wider. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Tucker's hand dropped to his holster. Clara's rifle rose before he could draw. Her voice cracked like a whip. "Try it. I dare you." Tucker stared at her. Clara turned just in time to see a settler break from the trees, rifle leveled at Koa's exposed side. She scrambled to her feet, heart hammering, and fired without aiming. The shot slammed into the man's shoulder. He spun, dropping his weapon as he fell hard to the ground. Clara stood frozen, smoke curling from her rifle barrel. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her hands trembled. Koa stared at her, not in fear, not in anger, but in something deeper, recognition. She had drawn blood in defense of him. There was no going back now. Another shot rang out, this one closer. Clara ducked, pain lancing across her upper arm. A graze, not deep, but enough to knock her sideways into the dust. Before she could rise, a shadow moved fast beside her. Koa, he crawled toward her, dragging his injured leg, one arm bracing his body, the other outstretched toward her rifle. His chest heaved, sweat and blood staining the fabric of his shirt, but his eyes never left her. She handed him the weapon. Together they pressed against the wall of the cabin. He loaded, aimed, and fired, steady, practiced. The rifle bucked in his hands. Clara watched him work, watched the pain twist his face and the fire in his eyes refuse to dim. This was no enemy, no myth, just a man fighting for breath, for survival. For her. Gunfire surged again as the settlers pushed forward. Another warrior cried out, dropping behind the fence. A horse bolted riderless. Clara reloaded, teeth gritted, and fired again. They fought side by side, two against many, neither retreating. Eventually the tide shifted. The settlers faltered. One dropped his rifle and ran. Another cursed and pulled his wounded comrade from the fray. Tucker, bleeding from his shoulder, shouted something incoherent and disappeared into the trees. And just like that, it ended. Smoke curled through the air, hot and bitter. The dust settled. Silence fell. Clara sat in the dirt, panting. Blood oozed from her arm. Her dress was torn, face streaked with sweat and soot. Koa slumped beside her, chest rising in shallow breaths, but alive. She looked at him. He looked back. No words passed between them. None were needed. She had crossed a line today, not by accident, not by circumstance, but by choice. With powder on her hands and fire in her chest, she had claimed her place, not with one people or the other, but with the truth that no one owned her. Koa reached for her hand, slow, tentative. She didn't flinch. Their fingers met in blood and dust, and held. The battlefield lay quiet now. Smoke drifted in low ribbons across the sunlit yard, curling through broken fences and the scorched wood of Clara's porch. Empty shell casings glinted in the dirt. The wind carried the sharp tang of gunpowder and blood. Tucker and his men were gone. Those who could still ride, anyway. The rest had crawled or been carried, leaving behind wounded pride and spent bullets. None had the stomach for a second round. Clara sat slumped beneath the cottonwood tree near the well, legs stretched out, her arm wrapped in a strip of her own torn petticoat. Blood oozed through the cloth, but the pain was dull now, far away. Her chest still heaved with every breath. She had survived. But she didn't feel victorious. Maka approached her slowly, his boots crunching over cracked earth. He stood over her, casting a long shadow in the dying light. His expression was unreadable. "You fight like Comanche," he said. Clara let out a shaky laugh. "I don't know what I fight like anymore." Maka crouched, his eyes sharp but not cruel. "You know what comes next?" She met his gaze. "More men. More guns." He nodded. "Your people will not forgive this. Not soon. Not ever. I never asked for their forgiveness." Maka tilted his head. "They will call you traitor, outcast." "I've been called worse," she said, "by better men." Maka's lips twitched at the corners, almost a smile. Then he rose to his full height, looking beyond her to the edge of the woods, where the warriors waited, already preparing to move, always ready to vanish into the land that had never betrayed them. Ko approached from behind, limping, but with more strength in each step than before. He carried her rifle slung over one shoulder. His shirt was torn, dirt and blood caking his skin. Yet in his eyes was something unbroken. He knelt beside her, slow and deliberate, and then without a word, he reached for her hand. His touch was careful, reverent. His fingers, calloused and rough, closed around hers with a gentleness that undid her. Clara swallowed hard. "No one comes out of a fire untouched," he said. His voice was soft, low. "No one survives whole." She didn't speak. "But you lived," he continued, "and you kept me living." They sat like that for a moment, hands clasped, heads bowed together, not in defeat, but in understanding. Maka stepped forward again, arms crossed. "You have no home now, Claire McKee," he said. She looked up at him, tired but calm. "Maybe I never did." He studied her for a long beat. Then his voice dropped, heavy with meaning. "Come with us." She blinked. "What?" He nodded toward the trees. "Leave this place, your people, their war. Come west. Live where law does not follow and blood still means something." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't pity. It was an invitation, a way out, or a way forward. She looked at Koa, who still held her hand. He didn't plead. He didn't ask. But in his eyes was something steady, true, a vow. Not in words, in being. She thought of the house behind her, splintered, burned, hollowed, of the grave she'd already dug, of the quiet ache in her chest that had been loneliness too long to name. She rose slowly to her feet, gripping Koa's arm for balance. "All right," she said. "No ceremony, no conditions, just the truth." They would leave together, not as prisoner and savior, not as settler and warrior, but as two people who had earned each other through fire. and still stood. The morning was pale and gold when Clara swung into the saddle one last time. The cabin stood behind her, scarred, smoke-stained, its windows dark and empty. The place that had once been her whole world now looked small, hollow, like something shed and left behind. She didn't look back. Not really. Her eyes passed over the roofline, the battered porch, the tree with the rope swing long gone to rot. Then she turned her gaze forward. Koa rode beside her, his legs still bound but stronger now. His back straight, his eyes on the horizon. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. The air between them was full of what had been said in gunfire and silence and the grip of a hand when the world threatened to end. The Comanche warriors moved in loose formation, slipping through the low canyons and brush like wind over rock. They didn't ride fast. This was not a retreat. It was a return. Clara followed, dust rising in soft spirals from her horse's hooves. Her hands were raw from the reins, her muscles sore from days of battle and sleepless nights, but there was no heaviness in her, only the clean ache of effort, of choice. The land changed as they went. The flat plains gave way to broken hills, then to winding trails beneath thick stands of pine and sandstone towers. The farther they rode, the quieter the world became. No more gunfire, no more accusations, just wind and hoofbeats and the occasional hawk circling far above. By dusk, they reached a narrow ravine flanked by stone and silence. The warriors dismounted, moving with the calm of men who knew they would not be followed here. A fire was built, not large, just enough for warmth. The group sat in a loose ring, eating in silence. Clara remained slightly apart, watching the flames dance, her thoughts slow and quiet. Koa approached after the meal, crouching beside her. He held something in his palm, a small necklace, crafted of polished bone, red stone, and tightly woven sinew. He did not speak. He did not have to.